So I've talked about a lot about the Mueller investigation. That, of course, is the investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. And, of course, the special counsel is attempting to find evidence of collusion. So that would mean, members of Donald Trump's campaign or Donald Trump himself possibly working with the Russians to go and subvert democracy. Now, that, of course, is the overall investigation, which has had a spin-off effect to a lot of other investigations. For example, one into Paul Manafort. Now, Paul Manafort, of course, has been indicted. He's actually been put in jail, and his trial is beginning. So, in that trial, there are documents that have been released that are being used in this trial. In fact, Manafort had been accused of hiding cash he made while working in the Ukraine in order to avoid taxes and lying about his debt so he could get additional loans. So that, of course, is some of the stuff that Manafort is in trouble for. Now, in June, Manafort was also charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy against the United States. Not only that, Manafort has been accused of witness tampering and has been indicted on money laundering charges for failing to register as a foreign agent. Now, that is actually very relevant because within these same documents, there is a curious name that happens to come up. That name, along with Manafort, happens to be Ted Devine. Now, wait a minute. Ted Devine? He happened to be the former campaign manager for Senator Bernie Sanders. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Hold. Now, the Washington Post has reported recently that Devine, a federal political strategist, also worked for Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych and his pro-Kremlin party of regions at the time between February 2010 until June of 2014. So what this is that, of course, this is a trial against Paul Manafort for taking that money and hiding that money and also lobbying on behalf of party of regions without actually saying that he's a lobbyist according to the United States. So you didn't register as a lobbyist. That means you're in trouble and you're also hiding your money. Now, Manafort worked with Devine. Now, Devine, they worked at the same firm. So understand that. They were co-workers, essentially colleagues in the same place. Now, Manafort is in trouble. Devine is not. It's probably because Devine didn't actually do any of the stuff that Manafort is accused of doing. Nonetheless, right? Here you have centrists that are immediately saying, that's it, that's proof, Bernie Sanders, Russian agent. So let me go through the facts, though. Now, here's the thing. So if you work with somebody who does a crime and you have emails with each other that don't involve any sort of criminal things, right, inside of it or any information that could implicate you in a criminal investigation, should you then be, does that mean you're involved in a crime? Is basically what I'm asking. No. And so what's going on here is that you had Devine and Manafort emailing each other about work. Now, their email exchanges while working for the Party of Regions, yes, is now part of Manafort's trial. In fact, Devine's name appears 16 times in the documents. But does that mean Devine actually did anything wrong? So far, no. And there doesn't seem to be any evidence. However, Centrist Twitter immediately said, that's it, Tad Devine, Russian plant, Russian agent, and he's the guy that made Bernie Sanders run against our beloved Hillary Clinton. In fact, on Twitter, there's a centrist Twitter account called the Horse Whisperer. He decided to go tweet a whole thread on this. Now, why that guy is important is because he's actually got about 125,000 Twitter followers. So he's got a pretty decent following on in centrist Twitter. So when he says something, people do listen because he has a pretty wide reach. Now, he wrote a thread and he said, the Russian Devine was communicating with Konstantin Kalimnik. That is another person that he had some email exchanges with while he was working for the Ukraine's Party of Regions. Again, he was working as a lobbyist because it was he was working for a consulting firm along with Manafort. Now, Kalimnik, the horse whisperer continues, is already under indictment by Mueller. Yeah. And again, what's the point here? Well, he says, Bernie's chief strategist was in touch with Manafort's shady Putin-connected pal right before joining Bernie's campaign. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh what? What exactly do you have? But no, they're like, nailed it. We got him. We got him. Devine was a Russian agent who convinced Bernie to destroy Hillary so that Trump and Putin could win. But wait a minute. If Bernie Sanders had actually won the primary, then he would have went up against Donald Trump. And polling between them always had Bernie Sanders at a huge advantage. Whereas Hillary Clinton, some polls she was ahead, other polls she was not. So campaigning in, not campaigning in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania actually had an impact because those were votes that she ended up missing because people were not engaged. In fact, she turned out less of the vote than Obama had for the Democrats. So what's the point? What's the evidence, right? Well, there is no evidence. This is centrist Twitter freaking out because, oh my God, look at this. We've got one person connected to another person that is connected to the Russians. Cue Glenn Beck with his chalkboard. That's what this feels like to me. Okay. But look, here's another centrist responding to that. He said, I don't have any inside info, but I'll say this. I fucking knew it. Bernie voted against Russia sanctions. Bernie never disclosed his tax returns. The Russians stood to gain by dividing Democrats. Occam's razor is sharp. The razor may be sharp, but you're kind of dull. I mean, your lines of reasoning are incredibly dull if you think that somehow means that Bernie Sanders is a Russian plant. For one, the Washington Post notes that their email exchanges between Manafort and Devine continued until the spring of 2014. And then they stopped. They stopped when Devine went to work for Bernie Sanders later on in that year. So, oh, look, they're no longer working at the same place. They're no longer colleagues. They're no longer lobbying on the same projects. And so they don't talk to each other anymore. How many people if you quit a workplace or you go to work somewhere else, how many people do you really keep in contact with? Your coworkers, right? Some do. And to be fair, I have before. But they didn't. Because it turns out Manafort and Devine are two completely different people with two completely different ideologies. One went to work for the Trump campaign. The other went to work for Bernie Sanders' campaign. And those two campaigns couldn't have been different. But anyway, those emails stopped. Now, there was a phone call that was revealed. That phone call actually involved setting up a Sanders-Trump debate. So Jeff Weaver comes over and he says, hey, you knew Manafort. Why don't you call him up and see if he can convince Trump to do a debate against Bernie Sanders? And he's like, you know what? That's a good idea. I'm going to call him up. And maybe, and they had something in the works. And then Manafort had apparently called Devine, and that call reportedly went unreturned. So he did not return that call. But anyway, the fact that they emailed each other while working for the same client at the same company doesn't mean anything. They stopped emailing each other afterwards. And again, what was in those emails, which they have, in court documents are, look, we don't know anything about. We don't know what's inside of them, but it's very unlikely it's going to be anything nefarious. It's probably going to be normal work stuff on behalf of Party of Regions. Now, nonetheless, they're going to still continue to scream, Bernie, Russian agent, Russian agent. Look, there's sanctions. He voted against the Russia sanctions. Okay, well, did he? Now, the Russia sanctions bill, there's a little bit of nuance in here. That bill to punish Russia for meddling in the 2016 election actually also included sanctions against Iran. Now, sanctions against Iran, here's the thing. Most people, well, at least Bernie Sanders, most progressives, were actually against that because we're in favor of the Iran deal, right? So here you had Europe attempting to try to save that Iran deal. So Bernie Sanders, of course, he's like, hey, I don't want to antagonize the Iranians even more. I actually want them to not pull out of that deal, even though the United States pulled out of that deal because of Donald Trump. I don't want the Iranians to do so. I want them to stay in the deal so they can not develop nuclear weapons. So that's why I'm going to vote no on this piece of legislation. Now, you think they understand this nuance? You think they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense because we're in favor of the Iran deal. Unless the centrists are no longer in favor of the Iran deal, which I have to remind them that President Obama actually made. He made that Iran deal. So, go against an Obama policy or trash Bernie Sanders. I think we know what choice they've made. But anyway, after that, of course, Bernie Sanders did not leave that alone. In fact, he recently introduced a new resolution. This resolution would affirm the findings of the intelligence agencies on Russian meddling. So basically saying, yes, the FBI, all of our intelligence agencies that have looked into this Russian meddling, they're right. I agree with their findings. This is Bernie Sanders in his resolution. Not only that, but it would also demand the already passed sanctions, which did pass, to be fully implemented, which Trump has not done. It would also move to protect the election system, which, by the way, the Republicans voted against protecting the election system, and not accept interference into Mueller's investigation, including the firing of Deputy Attorney Rod Rosenstein. Those things are exactly what a Russian plant would do. I mean, come on. Calling for tougher sanctions or into implementation of the tougher sanctions against Russia. Russian plant would do that. No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. Look, not only that, but Sanders said, Congress must act if they're serious about preserving American democracy. The Congress must make it clear that we accept the assessment of our intelligence community with regard to Russian election interfering in our country and in other democracies, Bernie Sanders said during a Senate floor speech. Now, do you know what happened with that legislation, by the way? It got blocked. Who did it get blocked by? Not Bernie Sanders. It got blocked by Rand Paul. Now, wait a minute. So by those centrist own logic, that would mean Rand Paul is also a Russian agent because he blocked those sanctions. Now, did Tad Devine ever work with Rand Paul? I'm trying to find the Russian connection. No, but it turns out Devine, who did Devine actually work for? He worked with Russian candidates such as Al Gore, John Kerry, Jimmy Carter, and Michael Dukakis. Oh, well-known Russians. Oh, wait. I think the only crime here committed by Tad Devine is that he just keeps on working on losing campaigns. I don't know what it is. He says he's a consultant. And yet, I don't think he's ever won a campaign. At least not in the United States. He's actually won campaigns, guess what? Working with political parties from overseas. In fact, he was in the French elections. He had worked with candidates that had actually won in several European elections. So his work with Ukraine was not just with Ukraine, he had actually done similar things for other countries because he is a political consultant. And if you're mad at that, well, you should also get mad at Obama when he worked with, of course, Emmanuel Macron in his reelection. Or, I'm sorry, in his election. But anyway, look, here's the other thing that Tad Devine also did before working for Bernie. He also helped create superdelegates. Superdelegates are one of the reasons that Bernie Sanders lost to Hillary Clinton. And then, centrist logic, Hillary Clinton lost to Trump, who, guess what? Backed by Russia. So, Devine and the superdelegates, Russian. What if Devine actually wanted Bernie Sanders to lose so that Russia could win? And maybe he also wanted Al Gore to lose in 2000 so that George W. Bush would win so that he could serve 2 terms, then get beaten by Obama, who also served 2 terms, and then to have Hillary Clinton get beaten by Trump, Russia. How ridiculous is this? This is so dumb. Bernie Sanders ran a primary because he saw the candidates that were running were not interested in bringing the kind of change that Americans were asking for. Now, the fact that Devine was a political consultant that worked at the same law firm as Paul Manafort and therefore worked with him on lobbying on behalf of the Party of Regions is a big fat nothing burger. That's what this is. And look, even if it's not, even if they find something incriminating in those emails, that in no way proves that Bernie Sanders is a Russian agent, which is ridiculous. I believe in facts, okay? And the facts that we have for Russian meddling and on Paul Manafort are fairly damning and will get adjudicated in court. What we have on Donald Trump is alleged collusion, right? Now, that collusion is speculation, and I've said that over and over again. I do believe that they colluded. I believe they have a deal, but I can't prove it. I don't have any proof, and likely you cannot prove this collusion. And even if you could, collusion itself is technically not a crime. Now, speaking of speculation, the whole idea that Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein are some Russian plants that were there to destroy Hillary Clinton by making her the most disliked candidate, even more disliked than Trump. Oh, wait, no, whoop, that's really not the conspiracy. No, that's actual fact. Hillary Clinton was one of the most disliked candidates and actually more disliked than Donald Trump and more distrusted than Donald Trump. That's not a conspiracy. That's just fact, right? But the speculation comes in that it was some sort of Kremlin-hatched conspiracy to get Bernie Sanders to run a primary. Ridiculous. There's no evidence. There's no facts to back that up. No. Here's the thing. If this was some Kremlin plot to beat Hillary Clinton, well, then they picked the wrong guy. For one, Bernie Sanders did not win against Hillary Clinton. He had a massive, massive disadvantage. Superdelegates, name recognition, all that stuff. And actually, what worked out better is what actually happened. And that's Bernie Sanders losing the election to Donald Trump. To Hillary Clinton. And then Hillary Clinton losing to Donald Trump. It worked out pretty well, I would say, for them. Look, this is nothing more than a self-serving, ridiculous conspiracy theory hatched by centrists, by unhinged liberals that are still upset that somebody dared to challenge their queen. And to them, I got a message for them. Stop. Get over 2016. It's done with. What happened is what happened. Okay? Right now, we have bigger fish to fry. We have an orange-skinned proto-fascist in office. And you're talking about 2016. And you're talking about people with no proof or evidence that ran a primary against Hillary Clinton, a Democratic primary, which we're allowed to run primaries. That's how you get candidates. That's what happens, being tools of Russia. You're being ridiculous. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.